Good evening and welcome to the Tuesday, January 28, 2014 special meeting of the Board of Education relating to public input on consideration of the proposed 2014-15 budget. Last night we had a presentation by Dr. Freeman as to what the substance of his proposals, and we heard from, I think there were roughly 90 people, 85 or 90 people here last night to talk about some of the issues. I think the focus last night was on full-day kindergarten, some on special education, some on a couple of other issues, but including teacher evaluations. Tonight, as is not unusual, is a little less well-attended than the first night. If we'd been able to plan that out, we might have been able to spread it out into two evenings, or spread half of them last night into tonight.
What happened to the other 88?
Whatever. What we will do, I think Dr. Freeman did do a presentation last night, and I think we'll forego that, Dr. Freeman, if
I was
that's
here
all right
last
with
night
you.
too.
Okay. Julia, do you want to hear it?
I did ask Dr. Freeman, though, to make at least be prepared to talk a little bit about specifically with full-day kindergarten, what the different day would look like. I know that some of the studies that we've looked at have talked about what the implementation of full-day kindergarten actually, and how it's implemented, makes a difference. And so if it's just simply a question of making the day longer, that may not be the most effective way to do it, but then substantively, what is it that looks different? Obviously, there are somewhat fewer members of the public here today than were here last night, so we obviously are going to hear comments from anybody who wants to comment. But then I thought what we would do, I don't think we're ready to vote on something tonight, or at least I don't feel like that there's a consensus for that. And so we do have a meeting, I believe, scheduled for Monday at 7:30 at the high school, you think?
I believe I need to confirm the location.
Is that high school? Okay.
Yep.
So, I think that what I would suggest we do is at least use our time tonight productively to at least identify issues to Dr. Freeman as to what some of our concerns might be. I know that I did have a brief conversation with him earlier today, and I think that he is, which is not unusual, he is prepared to make some potential changes to the budget, although I wouldn't want to put him in stone this evening, but I know we've expressed in our meetings some concern about some of the items and that he's proposed, and I think some of those you're ready to talk a little further about and perhaps make some changes. So I think where we are right now, at least where Dr. Freeman is as of this morning, was a proposed 3.07% budget increase. And I think that there are some potential reductions that he's going to recommend and suggest this evening, and certainly by Monday. So, unless anybody feels compelled to hear Dr. Freeman's presentation in the abbreviated version again, which I assume I'm going to take that as a no. Let me just ask if anybody wants to comment. Please come on up.
Do I speak here?
I think the big one is the one that works.
Okay.
I think the small one, although it's very annoying, it has no functional purpose.
I see a couple familiar faces. Hi, my name's Lori Moroso. I live at 861 Hoop Hole Road. I have 4 children. I have, my son is at the high school, I have a daughter at Adams, I have a daughter at Baldwin, and next year I will have a kindergartner at Melissa Jones. I'm one of those parents who are on the fence. It's obvious that a full-day kindergarten program is essential to meet the educational rigors set by the Common Core standards. However, I also feel that 5 straight it amounts to 7.5 hours for most children from pickup to drop-off. I feel that would be too much for some 4- and 5-year-olds. And on the drive home from the meeting last night, I thought, why not have a compromise? And I would like to put on the table a very simple compromise. Full-time, part of the time. have 3 days devoted to full-day kindergarten, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and have 2 days as part-time. We could consider next year the transitional year, not just for students, but for the parents of Guilford, because I know of many who are also like me and on the fence. I know many are full out, wanting full day every day, but there are many people who are somewhat afraid to speak in front of so many people and say that they are not quite sure about it. So I think that a compromise like this would appease the masses. It would give both sides what they want. And I listened to everyone last night and was very much persuaded for full day every day. But I just know that there are some 4- and 5-year-olds who are not capable of withstanding that 5 days a week. And also, I would like to thank each of you for devoting your time. It really is amazing the exceptional education our children receive in Guilford, and it's because it's led by all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. We did talk a little bit last night. Ms. Sullivan made this point at one of our last meetings. It would be easier, it would be a factor if Connecticut wasn't one of the 2 states that allowed children to start kindergarten at 4 years, 8 months. It's really early. It is. Now, I don't know what the message ought to be if we do, or what the message is in the 130 districts that have full-day kindergarten. Does the administration tell parents, look, you might, if your child is 4 years, 8 months, you might want to think about postponing. I don't know to what degree that message goes out, but it's not an unreasonable concern.
I don't know that any district overtly makes that recommendation. I do know that in districts that are similar to Guilford, that they do experience more parents holding their children back for that later year. That is a different experience than is seen in the more urban settings. In the urban settings, the parents are still bringing their students to school when they make the age cutoff. But in DIRD A and B districts, you are seeing parents that are deciding to hold their children for another year. And so the kindergarten cohort does tend to get older when you make the shift from half day to full day for exactly those concerns. I think the parents are making that decision independent. I don't know of any district that has overtly made a recommendation. It might very well be discussed individually at kindergarten registrations as parents come in and have that conversation.
So is that good or bad? Right? To have, let's say, a third of your children that would otherwise have gone into kindergarten at age 4 and something, in fact, wait a year. Is that helpful or unhelpful?
It's going to be hard in first grade, because then they're not only haven't had the benefit of any kindergarten first, but they're still that much younger than all their peers.
No, that's so they would start later.
That's right, they hold them and they delay a
Oh, I
year.
see,
Yeah.
that's not
So
saying,
like
I see.
my girls were born in February. We had the choice of either starting them when they were, a little bit under, whatever. I mean, we started them a year later than we could have. Right.
Only citing secondhand research, but I know that Gladwell and Tipping Point wrote a lot about that age component. And so I think from a performance perspective, the idea of the overall cohort getting older, you're going to have children who are a little more mature, a little more developed, and oftentimes those kids become a little more successful as they roll forward. I have no direct research. I'm only thinking back to Gladwell, who actually talked about things like soccer leagues and hockey leagues.
Which is all right.
But it is an analog,
It
yes.
is a trend.
Yes, it is an analog. And you do see in affluent communities the practice of redshirting those kids anyway. There are parents who will choose to keep their child for that additional year because they feel that their child's going to be another year older and another year mature, and therefore is going to perform better or compete better in the cohort, however you choose to look at that.
So we have an age that they can be, at the youngest age they can enter kindergarten. Is there an age that they are too old to enter kindergarten?
You know, we have kids who go from 4 to 6, and so there's, that year swing is always built in there. I believe the legislation says that all children living in a municipality aged 6 or older are required to attend school. And then you start getting into, you know, are the parents going to homeschool? You know, at 6, if a child is not enrolled, we would expect notification that they're homeschooling, or we might begin having to speak with them about our responsibility to refer them as truant.
So does that mean that a parent who didn't want to enroll the child in full-day kindergarten and the child was 5?
Would be able to
Would
hold
be
a
able
year
to
and then enroll that
either-
child, yes. I think
Either do a private setting or a daycare or something else and then enroll them full-time in first grade?
I don't know, it's interesting, I would need to look, I don't have an elementary principal here to reference. I would think that if a student came in and was 6 years old or older on, 6 years old on September 1 when school was to
Right.
start, I think there'd be a conversation about placement. I think we'd be talking about whether we were placing that child in kindergarten or were we going to place that child in 1. If there were not a formal private kindergarten, I think that you'd probably, we might do an informal assessment, we might do an informal reading assessment and make that determination.
Makes sense. Okay, anybody else in the public want to comment?
I'm just wondering if the idea was tossed around at all, of being a part-time, or not full-time all the time. Had that previously been thought?
We did, we had looked at the opportunity of a 3/4 day. So we didn't look at the way that you described it, where it's a full day and a half day. Options that were discussed at the administrative level were options where the school year may begin at half day and ramps up to full day by the end of the school year. So you have a sliding calendar where there is a half day maybe for the opening. And then we did talk about a 3/4 day last year. Mr. Kazin raised that question, and I actually had a conversation with another Connecticut superintendent who, they have a 3/4 day in Orange, Connecticut. And we talked about each of those last year. They were not part of our recommendation, primarily for logistic and financial concerns. And so, in fact, the superintendent in Orange describes her 3/4 day as the best of all possible worlds. But they've been doing it for 9 years. They have a very different geography where they only run buses to 1 kindergarten campus at that point of the day. After talking and after describing our situation and asking her, her opinion of our situation, she said, you got to do the full day. If she were looking at it now with Common Core and with our situation, she understands why I have proposed, why our administrative team is looking at full day. I have to acknowledge, a lot of the concerns are logistical and financial. It's complicated and doesn't necessarily have offsetting savings to do a 3/4 day the way a full day does.
What about the idea of allowing parents to come on designated days of the week to pick up their children early? Sort of a self-selecting program like that.
I worry about the consistency of the classroom for the teachers and for the students who are in there, and then I do worry about the impact that creates for first grade. When we talk about the fact that bringing everybody into a full day will allow us to look at what we accomplish in first grade, and be able to pull out the components where we're saying, we didn't get to these standards in K, so we start first grade a little, we'll be able to make those adjustments. In my hometown of Killingworth, when they shifted to full-day kindergarten, we allowed choice. And so some families signed up for full, some families signed up for half-day. And in my elementary school, I don't know what the numbers were district-wide, but we had one section of kindergarten where the teacher had 20 students, 10 of whom went home at lunch. And it created a very difficult situation for that teacher, and in fact for the 10 students who stayed, because you didn't want to begin new instruction. It was awkward, and it only lasted for the 1 year. By year 2, that option had gone away and in fact wasn't requested. It was really a transitional thing. It was a way to get the first group of parents who weren't expecting it through, and now I don't believe there are any requests for a half-day program. Everybody goes to the full day. My son was one of the first, my youngest son was in that first cohort to go through the full day K. So I had 3 who had a half-day experience and 1 who had a full-day experience.
Okay. address the board on anything relating to the budget? Just asking.
Speak.
That's appropriately, so.
No, that's fine.
John Terenzi, 3 Mile Course. Just want to briefly make mention of the IB program that is in the budget, change gears a little bit, and the opportunity that Guilford has with pursuing just the inquiry in search of the potential of IB in the town and the high school and what it can give to our students. It would be nice to see this remain in the budget so we can pursue just actively engaging in dialogue with teachers, with other communities, other schools, informing more students and more parents as to why IB is a different program and is a program and how it can benefit our students in this incredibly competitive market of college and beyond as we look towards 22nd century in terms of what they're going to have to know, because that's a moving target. So just want to keep our eyes on the IB program as a really strong and potentially wonderful program for this community. Thank you.
Does anybody else want to add anything, comments? Anything? Okay. Do you want to say? Okay. Let me just, and I know we did get a couple of emails today. You see, Dr. Myers, you have one printed out. Do you want to read that?
Sure, I actually have two.
I'm going to pass Mr. Sands one of yours and then.
I'll give you that one.
Okay.
First one is from Mrs. Pam Medvecki, and she writes, "Much as many want 2014 to hail the dawn of full-day kindergarten in Guilford, I wonder if the timing could be worse. From where I sit, with 4 children in 3 different Guilford schools," sounds like familiar, "it seems administrators, teachers, students, and parents surely have all they can handle to find their bearings and work out the kinks in a curricular landscape rewritten by the CCSS. Teachers and administrators are still mapping out Guilford's interpretation of the standards, tinkering with math and science sequencing, figuring out how to reach and challenge all learners within the new parameters, and even searching out appropriate classroom resources. Math classes are operating without textbooks as the search goes on for appropriate text tied to the new standards. As a district, we are also barely on toe in one of the 2 considerable all-encompassing frontiers with steep learning curves and consequences all their own: the new teacher evaluations and smarter balanced testing. The upshot, the dust is hardly settled on how K-12, as we know it, should look after the biggest upheaval public education has experienced in recent memory. Though it's been on the burner for a long time, adopting all-day kindergarten within this context, within this budget, is thus premature because it entails planting the orchard before the forest has been cleared. We owe it to the reputation of our schools to get better bearings before proceedings. So much has been said about tougher new standards for kindergartners. As a parent of a 3-year-old, I'm aware of the broad developmental domain of kindergartners and can only embrace a deferred adoption of full-day kindergarten if that full day will be filled not only to satisfy academic standards, but also to provide space for opportunities, quote, lost or squashed in the current schedule. The first formal year of schooling deserves every chance to be the most polished, playful, seemingly seamlessly plotted, socially and developmentally rooted experience our schools can deliver. Why not wait a year or 2 until we have a district, until we as a district are less encumbered and can give it the attention it deserves?
I also received the email from David Roberts of 961 Route 80 in Guilford. Said, "I'm writing as I will not be at the public hearing, and I would like to make the following points." With reference to the all-day kindergarten proposal, we should recognize that there will always be advocates for one pet project or another. But I ask you to please consider the best interests of the silent majority of taxpayers. We are already burdened with some of the highest tax rates in the nation, and owners' budgets are stretched in all directions. The advocates should be reminded that whatever the merits, there is only so much that could be appropriated from their neighbors, who all have their own priorities and goals. It may be responsibly saving for college or retirement, or perhaps something frivolous such as a new car or a vacation, but as taxes keep increasing, any personal goal gets harder to accomplish. The message to the advocates needs to be that they are already getting a new high school, and that will have a major impact on already hard-pressed taxpayers for decades. Then there is the likelihood that some parents would prefer to spend the time with their infants and provide a learning experience that they deem appropriate, although I accept that there are others who appreciate their child care costs being picked up by the taxpayers. Also, I question if a cost-benefit analysis has been carried out. With Guilford students already achieving high levels of graduation, it seems unclear to me how such value would be gained from additional spending. If, of course, parents see sufficient worth in all-day school for such young children, they can reprioritize their personal budgets and direct some of their existing discretionary spending to their own child's development in a private facility. Thank you, David Roberts.
Okay, thanks. I don't think I got any other emails myself. I certainly want to encourage members of the public to communicate with us. We are going to vote on this, I think, next Monday. That's the plan anyway. So anybody who wants to be heard on this should really take the time now to get in touch with us and get your friends to get in touch with us, because there are still a lot of issues to be decided. I know Dr. Freeman, I think several members of the board have expressed some skepticism about the proposal relating to custodians staffing, and we are still very much up in the air about the health insurance line. That is a moving, I don't want to say it's a moving target, but it's a target that we need to get some more certainty on. Recognizing that one of the problems is that we're very, very early by charter, we have to do this now as opposed to a month or two from now. On the other hand, we're trying to predict really 20 months into the future, effectively, or 18 months into the future. So that does complicate things. I wish we were a little later.
Well, what can we do about that? Can we
Change the charter.
Well, how much time do we have to go up until the actual date that we have to vote on?
I think on the operating budget, we don't have a lot of time at all. I think there is the timeline that we set out, I don't know, 3 months ago. I think we want to give the Board of Finance enough time to look at our proposals. And they've been great, obviously. We met with them last night for almost an hour and a half, and they've been involved all along, so it's not like, I don't think they're going to be surprised at our budget. On the other hand, we do want to give them enough time, and because all of the boards, Board of Selectmen, our board, we don't have the overall picture the way the Board of Finance does, and they know what's happening really with the town finances overall, and so everybody, I think we need to work as cooperatively as we can. The real, someday when I've got some spare time, I'll propose a charter revision commission to, because we really could move it back a month, the charter, the referendum approval. And that would actually be quite sensible in terms of budgeting, because we'd have another month of experience. One of the reasons that, that we're told that Anthem is so, gave us the numbers they did on the renewal figures was because that you're projecting so far into the future. That they're people who project things far into the future, by definition, they assume the worst is going to happen, and the closer
Very
you get.
conservative.
Yeah, and that's fine, and that's rational. So,
Well,
anyway.
that medical number is one of our big question marks in the
Correct.
budget, and if we were to have and the calculation is based on year-to-date performance. So voting on February 3rd, we would not have January numbers. We postponed it
Correct.
even a short amount of time, we would. And that would increase by 15% the amount of data that's used in that calculation.
Well, it is worth noting, however, remember that in the original budget that we discussed a few weeks back, we were working on Anthem's numbers. And what the budget in front of you now holds is Anthem's numbers interpreted essentially by our past annual experience as a town and as a Board of Education. And so we're already coming in below what Anthem is recommending. And we have ensured that the town finance director is comfortable with those numbers. We heard last night that the Board of Finance is comfortable with those numbers. But essentially, we've moved forward in the projection cycle even though Anthem hasn't. So we may get adjustments from Anthem, but those will only now work towards catching up to the number that we're actually budgeting. I don't know that they're going to make adjustments that would bring us down below the number we're at now, not before.
Well, my concern is our number's too low.
Okay,
And our number consists of an average based on our year-to-date actual performance plus 9%.
Right.
So if we had another month in, following that same formula, it might give us a better indication of where we might end up.
if we're being, all right, if we're not being cautious enough, I misunderstood the question. Okay.
We can check on that. I know that we are under deadlines, what I think we treat as mandatory deadlines to try to get something. And remember, if, for example, we put in a number now, and then we get some better data in the month that the Board of Finance is considering it, we can say to them, look, this is a better, we think we can, the numbers are not written in stone until it actually is
Slated.
when the town meeting votes to put it to referendum, that's when it's written in stone. Up until then, I think, it's entirely reasonable. I'm not sure, Board of Finance pre-town meeting, I'm not sure that's allows an amendment, but certainly up to the time the Board of Finance votes on
Absolutely.
it, it can be.
Right. If you voted on a number and then wanted to amend it prior to the Board of Finance taking action, I'm sure that the Board of Finance would be able to adjust it at their meeting.
So are there other issues, questions that we think Dr. Freeman or Mr. Bowden or Mr. O ought to be prepared to discuss on Monday?
I will repeat a response that I think I made last night, but I believe I made it at the Board of Finance meeting. The board is correct, and when we talk about the two custodial positions that we were looking at, one of them was proactively moving forward towards our move to the new high school. It could very reasonably be deferred, and so of the two custodial positions total that we've requested, we could defer one of those. It would generate a reduction of $77,000 by holding one and moving forward with one FTE. I would still very much like to see a .5 custodian added to the staffing here in this building. And then I would want to have conversation with Mr. Gurnham about whether or not he felt the additional .5 could best be applied to the current staffing at the high school this year, again, sort of ramping up, or to follow along with his idea of having that third shift maintainer, somebody who could be doing work here in the buildings when teachers and students aren't going to be impacted by that work. But I would be very supportive of the idea of reducing one of those two positions. There would be no instructional impact, and I believe that it would be a reasonable impact to the maintenance of the buildings.
I'm not quite understanding, I respect the request for it, I'm not quite understanding ramping up for a building that doesn't exist yet. You know what I mean? Like
Yes.
how, I'm not sure what is gained by having additional staff.
Sure.
If our additional high school needs people, that's a different issue, but I'm not sure what it means to ramp up to a building that doesn't exist.
There's sort of three components to it. One is that in all of our buildings, our staff is essentially working above the recommended,
Right.
the industry recommended square footage component, so we could always use the additional hands.
Absolutely.
Additionally, as we get closer to that move, there's going to be work that needs to be done at the high school. We'll need to be inventorying current furniture stock, determining which of that stock will travel with us to the new building or be redirected to these buildings. And then as we get to the move, there will be work provided, necessary there. So part of that was gaining up, and then part of it was the idea of spreading that impact across more than one budget cycle, so that as the new building did come online, We weren't simply making the request for the additional staffing because of the square footage in one budget cycle, being able to spread it across. Again, it's easy to defer. We could absorb the work with existing staff as we move towards the move. And yes, we don't have to prepare for the new building. We could simply staff the new building when it comes online in the summer of 15.
Or could, thinking out of the box a little bit, create a half position that doesn't start until January of next year? You know what I mean? I mean, if the idea is
Yes.
ramping up, is furniture, is the kind of stuff that's gonna be more important mid-semester in the spring of 2015 than next fall,
Right.
depending on how important it is.
That would be easy to do, or the idea of that .5 being maintained our first part of the year and maybe sliding into, right, the custodial staff when the work becomes necessary. And it wouldn't necessarily have to be at any date certain, it would be when we start having the impact of that preparatory work. Yeah.
Are there any remaining decisions on surface treatments for the interior of the schools? Some of the changes that we've made from vinyl tile to perhaps ceramic that will require less maintenance? Are all those decisions in, what aren't in, what may be coming down the road?
No, I think that we've made all the decisions possible that will make the building as durable and as low maintenance as possible. We've been able to increase the tile over the vinyl tile so that we have porcelain tile in most of the areas. We've been able to go with more durable finishes in most places, and most recently, Mr. Gurnham realized that there were some floor drains missing in the plans. So not every bathroom had a floor drain, which makes it more labor intensive to clean. A floor drain makes it much more efficient to go in and do a thorough and quicker job. So no, we do have a building that's going to work with us and is going to be more easily maintained. But that said, it's still larger, significantly larger than the building that we have today. And again, we want to make sure that we go in from the get-go and don't start deferring maintenance. We want to make sure that we care for it properly. So we've done everything we can to minimize the labor hours that go in, but I do want to make sure that we staff that properly.
And do we have a sense of what that delta is going to be if we pretend there's not, or we decide not to have a transitional person? What is the additional FTE going to be for that new building? Do we have a sense of that?
Yeah, I had it and I don't have it off the top of my head, but I can have it for you Monday evening, no problem.
Okay.
There's one other piece that goes with the health insurance. The part that we were just talking about with Mrs. Renner is based on projections of premium equivalents into the future.
It's not, it's actually, it's taking the past 6 months, averaging them out,
Right.
assuming that will apply to the next year and then tacking on 9%.
Correct. There's another piece to our cost, and that is the stop-loss insurance,
Right.
which is purely an insurance premium. And we asked the consultant to give us projections of what would happen if we decreased the stop-loss level from 225,000 per individual down to 200 to 175 and so on. And there is possibly a significant savings to us in that premium if we lower the level that the insurance kicks in. And that can be, if it's real, that can be factored into our budget, because that's fixed. And I hope by Monday we could have
Confirmation on those numbers.
confirmation of that, because
Yeah.
I did some back of the envelope calculations, and if that is true, we might be able to save about $150,000 in the health insurance line. And if that holds, that would lower our budget from 3.07 to 2.67. So I hope by Monday, Jason, we would have that sort of stuff.
I'll confirm it with the consultant.
Great.
Other questions or issues that we want to be prepared, have the administration be prepared to discuss on Monday?
I do have some other questions, yes,
Go ahead.
and we've discussed this already, Mr. Bowden and Ms. Trudeau and I, so this may be on the plan for Monday. But I had a question about the decrease in special education costs. I'm trying to get comfortable that the decreases are appropriate, that we're not going to be, cutting things too close. And my concern was that the decrease in the number of outsourced students which my understanding is we're going from the low 40s to the low 30s. So a 25% decrease. We have a much bigger decrease in the tuition line and a much greater decrease than that in the transportation line, and I wanted to have a better understanding of that.
Yeah, we'll have Mrs. Brown's actual spreadsheets, and we'll have those available for Monday's conversation.
That's great, that would be great.
That's probably the easiest, I mean, other than the fact that you may get new people moving in. That's such a finite group that you'd think that would be pretty clear on that.
Yes.
So that's fine.
Yes.
Yes, we worked with the actual placements, the actual tuitions, and the actual runs, but we'll have all of that available.
That's great, and the other thing we talked about was class sizes. I feel that it's.
The class loading.
Class loading,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you. Great thing for us to see.
I do have that, I think I have available this evening.
You have a copy?
What we have done is we have, and again, I will say thank you to Dr. Moore, but using the template that Dr. Moore put together a couple of years ago, we gave this to you in October with the current class sizes in it, and this is our projections for September 1 with the classes as they roll forward. So it allows you to see the actual teacher-to-student ratio or class sizes at each grade level, at each location, and that takes you up through grade 8. Again, the high school, it's different for every section, and so we can't break it out this easily, but this will show you projected teacher-to-student ratios at each grade level, each location through grade 8 next year.
Okay, this is at least a starting point.
It takes a while to look at it, so if we can distribute it, maybe we can talk about it Monday, but
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, two of the items under investments that if you could just again detail for us. And first making sure that numbers right now you seem to be at the same as they were when you originally projected. The professional development coordinator for the IB program, the $70,000 investment that Mr. Terenzi spoke to a moment ago. And Dr. Freeman, the studies compose $50,000 for studies as to high achieving students and enrollment. If you could just, again, expand on those and where do you see the numbers going?
sure. And these are both truly budget numbers. For both of these are projections, and it's much harder to have specific hard numbers in these areas. But in IB, what we have done is we have combined two areas. A professional development request that has come through the staff at the high school and Mr. Macenti for continued professional development for teachers as you prepare for IB. When the staff presented to you at Leet Elementary School, to enroll for inclusion in IB, you have to be able to note that you've reached a certain ratio of members of the staff that have been to a formal IB training session, and there are not a lot of those that are available regionally. This year, we were fortunate to have support from GFFE. We were able to send a number of teachers to Florida. They received IB training, and they've come back and presented to their staff. So there's money in here to continue training more teachers as we roll through next year. A second or even a third cohort who might be able to go and receive formal IB training. Additionally, there's a recommendation in here for a .5 IB coordinator. The IB organization recommends that as you are moving through the process and preparing for your IB application, that you should in fact have a full 1.0 release. Somebody who is released from direct instructional duties who helps to organize the professional development, begin preparing the school for the application process, and in large degree doing the information sharing with the community. Parent evenings, organizing discussions about AP and IB and how the two will work together, working with the high school administration, preparing for how the schedule will run moving forward. We're not recommending a full-time position. We're recommending at this stage that we have a half-time release at the high school so that somebody begins to have the time to absorb that. That is budgeted at first-year teacher level, not assuming that we're going to go out and hire somebody new who doesn't know us, but that an existing teacher at the high school may receive release time, and we would pick up those uncovered classes with a younger, less experienced faculty member who comes in.
So approximately 25,000 of that 70,000?
Yes, exactly. And then the balance would be for the PD and the continued training. and possibly application fees should we begin to work towards the April 1st deadline of next year. There would be some application fees. Mr. Masenti detailed those for you. I don't expect you to remember those, but there was sort of a number of cost centers. There's an application fee as you begin to go through the process. There's the training and professional development component, and then there's the coordinator. Those three are combined to generate that $70,500 figure that you see for next year.
And I do remember from the presentation that from some point in time, it takes 3 years to be completely up and running. Am I remembering that?
2 years.
2 years? Is it 2 years? Oh, okay.
So
I
we're
didn't-
projecting from beginning of next school year that we'd be 2 years out, or from now?
Approximately 2 years from when you make that first application.
Okay.
So it's-
Initial application. Oh, okay, that was my
Thank
follow-up
you.
question, like when does kind of the
April
time
1st.
start? Okay.
Do you have, if I can ask, any sort of a projection of the costs of getting the program up to speed and running on a continuing basis?
The annual
By
costs?
year kind of a thing, yeah.
Yeah, I can have those detailed out for you. So next year, we know that we're looking at a cost of $70,000. I can project costs for the second year, and then I can try to have a projected cost, projected what will then become annual cost as we move forward. I'm sure that working with Mr. Masenti and the team at the high school, we can have those three numbers for you when we meet, and some detail as to what puts those numbers together.
Well, I'm curious, I still have this question in my mind, I think Mrs. Balstracy mentioned it, district leadership team, there's clearly enthusiasm to this program from the administration at the high school and the principal, but I haven't heard a lot of enthusiasm or comments from parents. Do we, there's nobody to speak for it tonight, I'm not sure if people just don't know enough about it, or I just want to make sure we're getting involved in something that people really want before we proceed with it.
Part of our work next year, we know, will involve more communication with the public at large. Our real target audience, in fact, are middle school parents, the current high school parents. This is a program for juniors and seniors, so students who are sort of enrolled in the high school now, 2 years out will probably be junior, so we're targeting our middle school parents, and we need to have more of that. The money here supports the continued work, the continued community involvement. There's no formal commitment to IB here, other than the implied commitment of spending money on something that isn't a final decision at this point. And the fact is, we need to do more work before we will be ready to make the formal commitment. You're right, we need to have conversations with the parent community. We need to talk about what IB is and how it is the same and how it is different from other enriched opportunities that we have at the high school. We need to have all those conversations. The fact is, we need to invest a little bit of money to get ready to have those conversations.
I'm sorry, it's been said already, but now I've got dates all mixed up in my head. Next March, not a month and a half from now, for an application.
Right, we do not intend to file our application this April 1st. We have work to do.
Okay, right.
And Amy, you're absolutely right. The process, the whole IB program is new to us. And even though I've been a little bit more involved by having taken a trip to look at it, it's still new. And I've talked to some people about it, but the community, it's void. Most of them have never heard of this. And where would they have? So it's our job to, I think, analyze this. If we make a decision to move forward, then we really need to, as Dr. Freeman said, start dialoguing with the community. Because there are misconceptions, I've heard some people say, well, it will replace AP. No, not necessarily. It can, but it doesn't have to. So there are lots of questions that people in the community may or may not have, but right now, most of it is a blank.
Just seems unusual to start with the $70,000 investment before those conversations happen.
Well, there was an earlier investment as well that we approved when, I forget the exact amount, at the meeting in October, the travel.
Yes.
Was it 15,000 or 20,000, I forget the amount.
Most of which was covered by GFFE. We by far covered a smaller portion than the GFFE invested in that trip.
That's right. So we want to find the right point of continuing to make nominal and increasingly less nominal investments that are tacit endorsements, implicit endorsements, and increasingly less implicit endorsements, especially as the numbers go up.
Correct.
So those details for the second year costs and the third year costs would be very helpful.
Okay.
And then if you could provide some details for the studies, the $50,000 for the studies.
Yeah, those are very much placeholders at this time, and they really are there to, we hope, offset the cost of one and a portion of the other. We are looking at different opportunities to provide the enrollment study, and you can find enrollment studies at a number of different price points. And so you could spend $10,000, you could spend $30,000 on an enrollment study. I have every intention of making a recommendation to this board to begin a study of how we serve our highest achieving learners within this school year. And it's not budgeted, but I believe that we will be able to find funds within this budget to begin that process. Some of the proposals that I have asked for, that I've requested, have come in significantly above what I was expecting to spend. And so a portion of that money may be there to offset one of those studies, should we go with a very detailed study that has a high price point, and I would negotiate a payment plan where we would be able to pay for a portion of that study out of the existing budget, and then a portion of that study with the money that goes into that dollar figure. I have recommendations, or I have proposals for some of those high achieving learner studies that justify the $50,000 on their own. To split it across two budget years would use that full amount, even if we paid for half of it this year. So if anything, that is a low number. It's there to offset those costs. But again, it's not specific. We haven't settled on any of the recommendations around high achieving learners, and we haven't even received any proposals or bids on the enrollment. I just know that we could spend that much, and quite honestly, it's probably a little less than we need, but I didn't want to commit more to that idea than the $50,000 that I show there. It's very much a budget figure. It's not a vetted figure.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Couple of other
I've got a
things.
couple of other things too. but,
Oh,
you know,
okay.
Go ahead.
Back to full-day kindergarten. My thought is relating to the paraprofessionals.
Yes.
That originally, in the original proposal by the administration, was meant to be one full-time for the whole program, and now we've reduced that to half. I would like to be more comfortable that that's sufficient. I don't know what other towns do, if there's a way of knowing what has happened in Madison or Branford. I know we were talking about the situation in Norwich, where between not having aides in the classroom, plus there was such a big bump in enrollment
Right.
when they offered the full-time program, that they had class sizes close to 30, and it was just a big situation. So I'd like to be
Make
comfortable
sure we have a
with it.
quality
Right.
program.
So, there's the full spectrum. There are programs that do have full-day aides. There are programs that have no aides at all. I can reassure this board that while we're requesting 6 teachers, and while we're projecting class enrollments that will fall between 16 and 19, I want to assure this board that should we have enrollment spike in kindergarten and see class sizes that begin to go over 20, I will be back in front of this board suggesting an amendment to our budget and finding a way to put another position into kindergarten. So I will not allow those class sizes to spike above 20. Your board guidelines call for kindergarten classes to remain at 20 or below. So just as we came to you this year and noted that enrollment had shifted, we had class sizes in grade 3 that were getting large, and we needed to add a position to grade 3. We made that clear, and we showed you how we would cover the expense of that. So, again, at this point in time, we tried to speak to our $56 million request and try to be as clear as we can where every dollar will be needed. But we do ultimately know that things move, and there is always the ability within a $56 million budget to move components if we need to. I hate to use this example, I'll use it because Mr. Ireland is not sitting on this board. But we have $500,000 now that we have assigned to our site improvement line. I will assure this board that if instruction became threatened by spiking class sizes, I would prefer to freeze spending in that line to free up $65,000 so that we could ensure that we had appropriate and manageable class size. I pressed our elementary principals on a full-day kindergarten and where their breaking point would be. If it was full-day kindergarten with a full-day aide, I know that you guys are okay and you want that. If it's a full-day kindergarten with a halftime aide, is it still going to be an enhancement, and are you behind that proposal? If it's a full-day kindergarten and no aide, and a teacher alone for the full-time with the students, where do we reach the point of diminishing return, and where do we say, at this design, we're not willing to move forward? At a halftime aide focused on literacy and mathematics, we continue to have enthusiastic support from our elementary principals. And with my assurance around class size, I'd say that I'm very comfortable moving forward, having brought your attention to the fact that we'll be watching class size carefully and hope that you're not disappointed or surprised if we come to you in June noting that we need to make that change.
And just piggybacking Mrs. Renner's question, at approximately 20,000 para, where by going to a half-time para per classroom, we're saving about 120. Am I making a fair jump? I'm looking at the paraprofessional salaries, that say 19,
Right.
2353 per para. So by having 12 half-time instead of 12 full-time,
Oh, yes.
we are saving about 120.
Well, more than that, because we're saving the,
And that's right.
And salaries
And
and
that's right.
and the
And
associated
then
health
that
benefits.
becomes
when you put the benefits on there.
That's right,
it goes up.
thank you, that's
So
right.
it was a
Okay.
greater reduction of that because by going with halftime
Right.
positions, we saved half of the salary and all associated benefit costs.
Okay, I just wanted to understand what we were talking in numbers if we're comparing half
Yep.
and full. Okay.
It was a significant reduction in cost and still has the confidence and the enthusiastic support of the principals.
Okay.
Anybody else? A couple of things. I know you're not going to be ready to talk about this tonight, but it is reported in the Hartford Courant that the governor sent a letter to the Education Department's Performance Evaluation Advisory Council urging it to amend the guidelines for educator evaluation to provide greater flexibility in the implementation of the evaluation support system. That may be really hard to have much of a handle on by Monday, but is that something that is going to, that it may have some impact, and if so, how? Second, just, I think, I would like to hear everybody reiterate from your side that if we go down the full-day kindergarten route, there is not a chance that we are going to have to add space, portables, building, anything else space-related. And why is it that you believe that? And then, because I'm just telling you, that is a road, that is a road we cannot go down. If there's any doubt about that, whether we have space in our 4 existing buildings with no portables, then we got to know that. And, I think we've tried to make that clear, but I think we need to reiterate that.
We have identified the individual and specific rooms that will be needed for kindergarten in each of the buildings, and even with an uptick in our projected enrollment, we will be able to absorb those.
How much of an uptick?
We are projecting that we will have class sizes of 16 or 17. Even if it were to pop up so that we were pushing class sizes to 18 and 19 across 12 sections, that is an uptick of 48 students. I do not project that we're missing, that our projections are off by 50 in kindergarten. My only concern would be that if that is geographically skewed and so that it lands all in one building, And even at that, all of the principals know that they've got some ability to maneuver. We do know that our elementary enrollment has been sliding. We're down about 140 students over the last 4 years. And so every principal has identified the specific rooms. Mr. Gurnham already has them noted for the minor renovations that will be required to make those spaces usable as kindergartens. We do not have to tear down or add walls. We do not have to punch holes. We do have to buy some smaller furniture. We have to swap out a toilet here with a smaller toilet there in some locations, but they are all very manageable moves. It would have to be an unprecedented enrollment change to come back and find out that we cannot absorb them in the buildings as we have them. Even needing to add an additional section at a building, we can absorb. We'd need to be looking at 2 sections needed in one building, and that would have to have all of the, any unanticipated uptick being geographically isolated.
But you could do an additional section at each of the 4 buildings.
Yes, if
If need-
necessary,
if need
each
be.
principal could find that additional space, and I don't see that being necessary in all 4. So I'll do everything short of assuring you, Mr. Bloss. I stopped giving assurances a long time ago.
Then it needs to be really close.
If we had, just to say hypothetically, if we had a spike in enrollment at a particular elementary school, do we have the ability to transport children to another school if the one that would have the spike was full?
It would be unusual. We do entertain requests from families occasionally to have a child educated outside of their district. Those are always viewed very carefully with an eye toward enrollment and space available. I would imagine in an unusual situation, we could offer the opportunity for students to move outside of their district and try to balance. It becomes awfully close to redistricting, which becomes a challenge, and I would be hesitant to use that as a solution. I would be more willing to look at an additional section. I think in the long run, that would be easier to administer and in fact probably more efficient in the long run. I think if we start getting into that, we're going to open up a hornet's nest of who gets to go, who doesn't get to go, and I would have to imagine there's going to be an associated cost with that in some way that I haven't thought through fully. Yes.
All right, we need to take a short break to change tapes.
Wow.
This is the smaller equipment, so we've only got hour-long tapes.
This is like a webisode.